I had just set my coffee mug on the old cedar table when the pounding on the cabin door shook the entire frame. 3 sharp, angry knocks, the kind that sound less like a request to enter, more like a warning shot. I froze. No one knew we were up here. No one was supposed to. That was the entire point of buying a cabin hidden so deep in the pines that even GPS gave up halfway through the drive. But somehow, she found us. Open up. The shrill voice stabbed through the morning air like a dentist drill with a personal vendetta. This property is in violation of Article 14, Section 9 of Pine Ridge Community Standards, and I need to perform an immediate inspection. My stomach dropped. HOA Karen. Her real name was Lorraine Parker, but everyone in Pine Ridge called her Karen behind her back, and sometimes to her face, since she tended to eschew any complaint, rule, or conflict within a 30-mile radius belonged under her jurisdiction. Pine Ridge wasn't even a conventional HOA. It was more like a loose collection of cabins with a few shared rules about trash disposal and winter road maintenance. But Karen interpreted shared rules the way a dictator interprets temporary emergency powers. I glanced toward the bedroom, where my wife, Emily, was still asleep, or so I thought. A soft rustle told me she was already awake and listening. What the hell is she doing here? Emily whispered, stepping out with a robe wrapped tight around her. I don't know, I whispered back, but this can't be good. The pounding continued, vibrating the door like she intended to break it down through sheer willpower. Open this door or I'll consider you non-compliant. Non-compliant? For a privately owned cabin that wasn't even part of her neighborhood? I stepped toward the door but didn't open it yet. Karen, what do you want? I called through the wood. She let out a dramatic harumph. I've received multiple noise complaints, unauthorized construction concerns, and reports of trespassing on protected community property. I blinked. We'd arrived last night. The only noise we had made was the soft crackle of firewood. As for unauthorized construction, the cabin was older than both of us combined, built in 1968. I don't think you have the right house, I said. And even if you did, we're not under Pine Ridge HOA. Karen scoffed. Oh, trust me, every property here falls under Pine Ridge jurisdiction one way or another. Now open this door before I escalate this. I could almost picture the vein throbbing on her forehead. Emily stepped closer to me. Don't open it, she whispered. Not yet. But I already sensed that if we didn't, Karen would just keep escalating until she invented a reason to call the sheriff, or the fire department, or animal control, or whatever agency she thought would get her closest to a power trip. I unlocked the door. The moment it cracked open an inch, Karen shoved it fully wide, forcing herself into our cabin like she owned the place. She was wearing her usual HOA dictator attire, an aggressively pressed khaki vest, a laminated badge that she definitely printed at home, and a binder thick enough to break someone's skull. Her eyes swept across the room, narrowing with gleeful suspicion. I knew it, she said triumphantly. I knew something was off. Off how? Emily asked, crossing her arms. Karen jabbed a binder toward the fireplace. For starters, that open-flame fireplace is not up to regulation. And those curtains, fire hazard. And that coffee mug, glass is prohibited outdoors, and technically I can cite you even inside because... Karen, I interrupted. This is not Pine Ridge jurisdiction. This is private land. Karen let out a wheezing laugh, the kind that made you wonder if she practiced it in the mirror. Everything within 10 miles of Pine Ridge is under my watch. Now, where are your permits? Permits? For what? For occupancy. For structural approval. For seasonal use. For, oh my, what do we have here? She marched toward the guest bedroom hallway like she'd lived there her whole life. Storage violations? Unauthorized renovations. She was reaching for the doorknob. Hey! Emily snapped. That's not your space. Everything is my space when regulations are being broken, Karen declared. Before she could barge in, Emily stepped forward and blocked her path. You can't search our home. Karen's eyes lit up, as if she'd been waiting for someone to challenge her authority so she could unleash the full Karen within. Actually, the HOA grant me full inspection privileges. No, it doesn't, Emily said calmly. Karen smirked. Oh, sweetheart, you're out of your depth. I could tell the exact moment Karen realized that Emily wasn't just standing there. She was holding a slim manila folder. Karen blinked at it. "Hard. What's that?" she demanded. Emily smiled, a slow, unhurried, razor-sharp smile that made even me feel a little sorry for our soon-to-be victim. "Funny you should ask," Emily replied, "because I was wondering the same thing about you." Karen's jaw tightened. "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything." Emily tapped the folder. "I'm stating it directly. You're trespassing." Karen choked on air. "Trespassing? Me?" "Yes." Emily opened the folder, revealing crisp legal documents with embossed seals. "This entire property, including the surrounding acreage you're standing on, is legally recognized as outside all Pine Ridge HOA boundaries. And according to this court-filed injunction," she flipped to the next page, "you were explicitly ordered 3 months ago to cease harassing, inspecting, threatening, or entering properties not under your jurisdiction." I watched color drain from Karen's face. Karen swallowed. "You can't have that." Emily's voice stayed smooth as black ice. "I do. And there's more. Because this," she pulled out one last sheet, "is a warrant for your arrest if you violate that injunction again." Karen wobbled. Actually wobbled. Her knees buckled like she might collapse onto the vintage rug she'd just insulted. I stepped forward. "You okay there?" She barely heard me. Her eyes were glued to the paper. That can't be real," she whispered. "You're bluffing." Emily held it out. "Look closely." Karen took the document with trembling fingers. Her eyes darted over the ink, and each sentence seemed to hit her like a brick. When she reached the bottom, where the judge's signature lived, she made a soft choking sound. Then came the moment I'll never forget. Her face fell apart. The bravado, the entitlement, the righteous fury, all of it melted into pure panic. You're lying," she tried again, but her voice cracked. "If I were lying," Emily said gently, "the county sheriff wouldn't be arriving in," she checked her phone, "6 minutes. Karen's eyes widened in primal fear. She staggered back toward the door like it might swallow her if she didn't move fast enough. You can't do this to me," she sputtered. "Why not?" Emily asked, tilting her head. "You've done this to everyone else." Karen shook her head violently. "This is a misunderstanding." "Completely. But her words dissolved into frantic squeaking. And for the first time ever, HOA Karen, the woman who terrorized half the county, looked genuinely, utterly helpless. And the only question left was, what happens when a person who abuses power finally faces someone who can strike back? Karen backed out of our cabin like she expected the floorboards to rise up and arrest her before the sheriff even arrived. Her laminated badge swung wildly against her chest, tapping erratic rhythms that matched the panic in her breathing. For someone who'd spent years marching onto porches, barging through yards, and threatening neighbors over bird feeders and mailbox heights, she suddenly looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. The woman who once screamed at a 92-year-old man for planting tulips 2 inches too close to the curb now stared at Emily like a cornered animal. You're making a mistake," Karen stuttered. "I wasn't harassing anyone. I was enforcing standards. Community standards." Emily stepped closer, not threatening, not angry, just steady. "That injunction wasn't filed because you were doing your job. It was filed because you abused your authority. And you did it repeatedly after multiple warnings." Karen flinched like the word stung. "People exaggerate. They don't like rules. They twist everything." "Karen," I said, "you climbed through the old Miller family's dog door to inspect their mudroom. That door is practically an entryway." She stopped, realizing how ridiculous she sounded. "They kept their recycling improperly sorted. I was trying to help them avoid fines." "There were no fines," Emily reminded her calmly, "because there are no regulations for indoor recycling." Karen opened her mouth again, but nothing came out. For the first time, she seemed to realize how deep she'd dug her own grave. Outside, the sound of gravel crunching under tires cut through the tension. Karen's eyes widened, huge, frantic, terrified. "Oh no. Oh no, 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 no." Her voice rose into a squeak. "He's early." Emily glanced at her watch. "Right on time." A white county sheriff SUV rolled up the narrow dirt path, kicking up dust like a veil behind it. The cabin suddenly felt smaller, the air tighter. Karen swallowed, pressing herself against the wall as if she hoped she could blend into it. When the sheriff stepped out, I recognized him immediately. Sheriff Donald Harlan. Late 50s. Tall enough to make most men straighten their posture. The kind of guy who'd give you a firm handshake and remind you he'd been in charge longer than the current town mayor had been alive. He approached us with the slow, unhurried confidence of someone who never rushed unless there was a fire or a felony. "Morning," he said, removing his sunglasses. "Got a call about a trespassing and injunction violation." Karen straightened her vest and attempted a smile, but it came out more like a grimace. "Sheriff Harlan, what a surprise. I was just clarifying a small community matter. These people are confused about the roles of Pine Ridge HOA. Karen." The sheriff's tone shifted into something almost fatherly. "Almost. Don't." She froze at that single word. "Let's see the paperwork," he said, nodding politely toward Emily. Emily handed over the folder without a flicker of hesitation. Sheriff Harlan scanned the documents, flipping through each page with slow, deliberate movements. Karen shifted from foot to foot like she was standing on burning coals. "You know what this says," he told her when he reached the last page. Karen clutched her hands. "Sheriff, this is all blown out of proportion. Neighbors gossip. They exaggerate. I was just keeping order. That's all." "Order?" He raised an eyebrow. "You cited the Henderson for grass too cheerful." Karen gasped. Their lawn was unnaturally bright. It looked artificial. "It was artificial," I said. Karen shot me a glare. "It was intentionally misleading." Sheriff Harlan closed the folder and tucked it under his arm. "Karen, we had this conversation more times than I can count. You don't have any legal authority outside Pine Ridge proper. And with this injunction in place, you're not allowed to initiate contact with residents who aren't under your jurisdiction." Karen's face twisted with desperation. "But they are, or they should be. Everyone near community benefits from its rules. Without oversight, people get sloppy. They build things wrong. They plant dangerous plants. They ruin the neighborhood aesthetic." Emily stepped forward gently. "Karen, is that what this is about? Aesthetic?" Karen blinked rapidly. "It's about order. About protecting what Pine Ridge is supposed to be." "And what is that?" I asked. "A place where you get to punish people for not living the way you want." Karen didn't answer. She looked at the sheriff as if searching for backup, but he simply waited, expression unreadable. Finally, Karen gave up pretending. "I can't get arrested," she whispered. "Not again." The sheriff sighed. "No one wants that outcome, Karen. But this is serious." She shook her head so hard her plastic badge nearly flew off. "You don't understand. If Pine Ridge finds out I violated the injunction again, they'll remove me from the HOA board. I'll lose my position." And I asked before I could stop myself. She stared at me as if I'd slapped her. "That board is my life," she said. "It's my purpose. You think people appreciate what I do? They don't. They take everything for granted. Someone has to preserve standards, protect the community. And if I lose that, then what am I?" Emily's expression softened, not with pity, but with something closer to comprehension. "Karen, being on that board doesn't give you worth. And it doesn't give you ownership of everyone else's lives." Karen looked away, jaw clenched. Sheriff Harlan stepped forward, voice firm but not unkind. "Karen, I'm giving you one chance. Leave the property. Go straight home. Do not approach these two again. Do not approach any residents outside your two assigned HOA cul-de-sacs. If you violate the injunction again, I'm going to have to act." Karen's throat bobbed as she swallowed hard. "And the board? Will they find out?" "That's between you and them," he said. "But this incident doesn't leave my lips unless it happens again." Karen let out a trembling breath, half relief, half devastation. She turned toward us. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," she muttered. "I thought I was doing the right thing." Emily didn't let her off the hook. Intention doesn't erase impact. Karen looked down, shoulders slumped. The mighty HOA tyrant looked less like a villain, and more like a woman who'd built her identity out of rules because she had no idea who she was without them. She trudged toward her car, each step heavier than the last. But as she reached her door, she paused. "You haven't seen the last of this," she said quietly, not threatening, but haunted. "Not because I want to fight you, but because you've made enemies you don't even know about." Emily and I exchanged a look. "Enemies?" I asked. "Who?" Karen's hand trembled on her car door handle. She didn't turn around. "Pine Ridge isn't what you think." Then she got in, slammed the door, and sped down the path, leaving a trail of dust and questions behind. Questions that chilled me far more than her threats ever had. Because if Karen wasn't the real danger, who was? The dust from Karen's SUV hadn't even settled before the forest swallowed the sound of her engine. The sheriff watched the road for a long second, as if making sure she wasn't about to turn around and come roaring back up the hill. When he finally turned toward us, his face was tight, not angry, but troubled in a way that made the hair rise on the back of my neck. "You two should keep an eye out," he said, lowering his voice. Because she wasn't lying. My stomach tightened. "About what?" "Enemies." He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Pine Ridge has factions, and some of them have been using Karen as their attack dog for years." Emily crossed her arms, protective and sharp. "If they try anything, they'll be dealing with our lawyer before they are done knocking." The sheriff nodded. "Good, but take it seriously. Karen's overzealous, but she doesn't fabricate threats. She just mismanages them." That wasn't exactly comforting. "Sheriff," Emily said, stepping closer, "what aren't you telling us?" He hesitated, the hesitation of a man who wasn't supposed to be saying anything at all. "Look," he said finally, "there's a small but loud group inside Pine Ridge who hate outsiders. They hate renters, weekenders, non-residents, and—" he gestured vaguely at the cabin, "people who don't buy into their idea of community purity." I blinked. "Purity?" He grimaced. "Their word, not mine." Emily's jaw tightened. "And they use Karen to do their dirty work." "They use Karen," he corrected. "Now that she's weakened, they'll be looking for someone else to push around." Before we could ask more, his radio crackled. He gave us one last serious look. "If anything feels off, anything at all, call me. Don't try to handle it yourselves." Then he stepped into his SUV and drove away, leaving us alone with a cabin full of unease. Emily shut the front door behind us. The silence felt different now. Too heavy, too crowded with invisible eyes. "Well," she said, trying for calm, "that was a fun morning." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "You think is exaggerating." She shook her head. "No, and neither do you." We unpacked in silence for a while, both of us listening more closely to the quiet woods than we ever had before. I kept glancing out the window, half expecting Karen to come barreling back with reinforcements. But she didn't. Instead, around noon, the forest greeted us with something far worse than Karen's shrill voice. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Crunching across the gravel outside. Emily stiffened instantly. "Someone's here." My pulse jumped. "Sheriff again." "No," she whispered. He would have called out. We both moved toward the window, inching the curtain just enough to peek through. A man stood at the edge of the tree line, tall, mid-40s, wearing a charcoal gray jacket and a Pine Ridge cap. His posture was straight, stiff, military clean. And he wasn't approaching. He was watching the cabin as if he expected it to move. "What the hell?" I murmured. Emily narrowed her eyes. "Do you recognize him?" "No. Does he look like someone who knows is being creepy?" "Oh, yeah." We watched for another tense 10 seconds. The man didn't shift, didn't blink, didn't even pretend to be on a walk. "This feels wrong," Emily said. Before I could agree, the man took 3 slow steps forward. Then 2 more. Then he stopped, right at the border where our property met the public forest land. He raised one hand in a small, casual wave. But there was nothing friendly about it. It was the kind of wave someone gives right before asking whether you know why they pulled you over. Then, just as silently as he had appeared, he turned and walked into the trees. Not hurried, Not suspiciously fast. Just deliberate. Like he wanted us to know he'd been there. Emily exhaled shakily. Okay, that was not subtle. Nope. She paced a small circle, mind racing. He wasn't lost. He wasn't hiking. He came here intentionally. And he knew exactly where the property line was. I added. Emily stopped pacing. This is Karen's fingerprints all over it. You think she sent him? Or she warned someone else that we're a problem? Karen's the type to tattle on people even when she knows she shouldn't. The thought made my stomach twist. We didn't call the sheriff. Not yet. We didn't have a name, a plate number, or anything more than a creepy encounter and a bad feeling. So instead, we did the next best thing. We walked the perimeter of the property, checking locks, windows, outbuildings, everything. The cabin wasn't big, but the land stretched a couple acres, enough for trees to swallow sound and shadows to pool in comforting or threatening shapes depending on the hour. At the far end of the property, something caught my eye. Em, you need to see this. She jogged over, and when she saw what I was pointing at, her face hardened. A marker flag, bright orange, the kind surveyors use, stuck deep into our ground. Was this here last night? I asked. No, she said immediately. I would have noticed. The paper tag attached to it fluttered slightly in the breeze. Emily plucked it off and read it silently. Then she handed it to me. Pine Ridge Community Development Boundary Assessment pending. Parcel under review for annexation. Annexation. My blood went cold. They are trying to absorb this land into the HOA, Emily said, voice low. But they can't, I said. This property is outside their limits. They were stopped years ago. She shook her head. Boundaries can be challenged. Retroactive zoning. Conditional expansions. They use threats first. Then assessments. Then forced compliance. And Karen showing up this morning, I said slowly. Wasn't a coincidence, Emily finished. We stared at the little orange flag like it was a landmine, because in a way, it was. When we got back to the cabin, Emily moved straight to her laptop. Her legal training kicked into gear. Research windows, property maps, regulatory codes, old HOA filings. She clicked with the focus of someone taking apart an unexploded bomb. Her expression darkened by the minute. Found something, she said finally, and you're not going to like it. I sat beside her. Hit me. She pointed to a digital map with boundary lines. Our cabin property was clearly marked outside Pine Ridge. But a new dotted line, proposed but filed, circled our land like a tightening noose. They've been planning an expansion, she said, and Karen wasn't the only one pushing for it. There are signatures from half the board, including... She clicked a tab. My jaw clenched. The man from the woods. Name's Marcus Hale, she said, vice chair of the Pine Ridge Board. And now he knows exactly where we live. Emily shut the laptop with a controlled calm that scared me more than any panic ever could. They want this land, she said softly, and they're used to getting their way. I met her eyes. So what do we do? Emily didn't hesitate. We make sure they regret picking the wrong couple. And just like that, our unease crystallized into something sharper. Not fear. The rest of the day passed in a strange, crackling tension, like the quiet before a thunderstorm when you can feel the electricity building in the air. Every sound outside felt amplified. Every shadow on the tree line looked like it might belong to Marcus Hale looming just out of sight. By sunset, neither of us felt like pretending things were normal. Emily shut her laptop, eyes sharp with resolve. They are trying something illegal, and if they want to fight, she stood up. We're going to give them one. Good, I said, crossing my arms. But what does fighting back look like? She gave me a slow smile, the kind she gets right before a courtroom victory. Step one is figuring out just how dirty this expansion is. Which meant what I already suspected. We're going into Pine Ridge tonight. Yep. I raised an eyebrow. And we're just strolling into enemy territory like we own the place. Oh, she said lightly, we won't be strolling. She opened her duffel, pulling out a pair of black jackets and 2 small pocket flashlights. My eyebrows shot up. We're sneaking into Pine Ridge. We're observing, she corrected. Observing is legal. Is it? For now. I exhaled heavily, grabbed a jacket, and followed her out into the dusk. The walk wasn't long, 20 minutes down a winding path through the forest until the neat houses of Pine Ridge appeared between the trees like a curated museum exhibit. Everything was too perfect. Straight lines, identical fences, identical porch lights glowing soft white in synchronized harmony. Even breathing felt out of place. We stayed low in the shadows, keeping to the unlit edges of the community trails. This part of Pine Ridge was beautiful, but in the way a dollhouse is beautiful, precise, untouched, a little unsettling. They run neighborhood watch every night, Emily whispered. Look for reflector vests. And Marcus, if he's as self-important as he looks, he'll be at the clubhouse. The clubhouse, Pine Ridge pride and joy, sat at the center of the neighborhood like the crown jewel of their kingdom. White pillars, manicured shrubs, a golden emblem of a pine tree over the door. And as we approached, we weren't disappointed. Voices drifted through the windows, heated voices. Board meeting. Emily's eyes lit up. This is perfect, she whispered. If they are discussing annexation, we'll hear it straight from them. We crept along the hedges, sliding under the dim glow of a porch light until we reached a cracked window near the side of the building. Inside, 7 people sat around a long polished table. Marcus Hale sat at the head. He looked exactly like he had in the woods. Rigid posture, controlled expression, eyes sharp enough to cut glass. And when he spoke, everyone else stiffened like troops receiving orders. We need the expansion approved by the end of the month, Marcus said. The land around that cabin is strategically important. Strategically important? Emily's grip tightened on my arm. One board member, a woman with silver hair and jittery hands, lifted a stack of papers. But the injunction, Karen wasn't supposed to be near them. If she violated the order... Karen is irrelevant, Marcus interrupted coldly. Her usefulness is ended. Useful. The word hit with a chill. That land is a final piece, Marcus continued. If we don't secure it, the development project can't proceed. Development project? My mind raced. Had this ever been about the HOA? Or was Pine Ridge hiding something bigger? Emily leaned closer to the window, eyes narrowing as Marcus spread a map across the table. Even from our angle, we could see it clearly. A proposed expansion. A paved road. Luxury cabins. And at the center of it all, our land. They want to buy the whole ridge, Emily whispered. Your cabin is blocking their construction. So they are trying to force us into compliance, I said. Or force us out. Inside, the silver-haired woman raised her voice again. But the owners, they are not under our jurisdiction. Trying to annex their land could open us to litigation. Marcus leaned forward, smile thin and humorless. Not if we create a compelling reason. The Pine Ridge Board has influence. We can request reevaluation of county zoning lines. And we can cite community safety concerns due to their unusual behavior today. Emily stiffened. Unusual behavior. Marcus smirked. The sheriff received a complaint about aggression from the cabin owners. My jaw clenched. He's lying. Of course he is, Emily whispered. He's framing us. The room erupted into discussion. Some hesitant, some enthusiastic, but all of them circling Marcus like planets orbiting the sun. But then, the door slammed open, and Karen marched in. Her hair was frizzed, her vest crooked, her expression wild from panic and humiliation. She didn't knock. She didn't wait. She stormed straight up to Marcus. You knew, she spat. You told me that cabin was already under HOA jurisdiction. Marcus didn't flinch. Karen, this is a private meeting. You used me, she snapped. You set me out there so you could report me for violating the injunction. A ripple of shock crossed the table. Marcus's voice remained maddeningly calm. Your behavior was unpredictable. You created liabilities for the board. You set me up. It's not personal, he replied. It's administrative. Karen shook, pointing a trembling finger at him. I gave you 10 years. 10 years of enforcing your stupid rules. And you're just going to throw me under the bus. Marcus sighed softly. You already threw yourself. The betrayal hit her like a physical blow. For a moment, silence reigned. Then something unexpected happened. Karen's eyes, wild, frantic, burning, shifted away from Marcus. Toward us, right at the window. Her eyes locked onto mine. "You!" she shouted. Emily grabbed my wrist. "Run!" But it was too late. The entire board turned toward the window. Chairs scraped. Voices rose. Doors flew open. And before we could even get our footing, a blinding floodlight snapped on overhead, bathing us in harsh white light. Marcus stepped out onto the porch with a smile that made the forest feel suddenly colder. "Well," he said, voice dripping with satisfaction, "looks like we have visitors." Emily yanked my arm. "Move!" We sprinted into the trees as footsteps thundered behind us, flashlights cutting through the darkness, angry voices shouting orders. This wasn't Karen's chaos. This was Marcus's. Organized, disciplined, dangerous. Branches tore at our jackets as we ran. The forest swallowed us quickly, but the chase behind us grew louder. "They are splitting up," Emily warned. "They are trying to box us in." I grabbed her hand and veered left, pulling her down a slope toward the river. Our cabin lay somewhere beyond the ridge, but reaching it wouldn't matter if Marcus and his crew caught us first. "Keep going." I panted, but we didn't make it far. A figure stepped out from behind a tree. Tall, broad, holding a flashlight like a baton. Marcus. He wasn't even out of breath. "Running?" he asked calmly. "That only makes you look guilty." Emily stepped in front of me. "We heard your meeting. We know about the development plan." Marcus's smile didn't fade. "And I'm sure you think that matters." "You're trying to steal our land," she said. "I'm reclaiming community assets." "This land was never part of your community," I snapped. He tilted his head. "Everything becomes part of Pine Ridge eventually." My heart hammered. Emily's voice turned cold. "You'll lose. I'll make sure you lose." Marcus stepped closer. "No," he said softly. "You won't." And then, behind us, branches snapped. More flashlights appeared. We were surrounded. Marcus clasped his hands behind his back, posture exact. "Come quietly," he said, "and this ends simply." My mind raced. Emily's breath shivered. This was no longer about an HOA or a boundary dispute or Karen's overreach. This was something deeper, darker, organized, and they thought we had no way out. They were wrong, because Emily whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "On my signal." Emily's hand squeezed mine just as Marcus and his crew tightened circle. Her eyes, sharp as knives, didn't waver from his smug, overconfident stare. I realized then she had been planning this, not just defending, but fighting back. And whatever she had in mind, it was about to escalate. "On my signal," she whispered. I nodded, though my pulse was already a runaway drum in my chest. Marcus stepped closer, a silent promise of control in every movement. "I suggest you reconsider," he said. "Resistance isn't wise. Not here. Not tonight." Emily gave me a slight nod, her hand brushing against the pocket of her jacket, the side where she kept the small devices we had packed for emergencies. "Resistance?" I asked, trying to buy time, my voice steadier than I felt. "Marcus, you think you're in charge, but you've underestimated the consequences of your little schemes." Marcus smirked. "Schemes? I'm simply enforcing order. Something your cabin has blatantly ignored." Emily's voice cut through the tension like a scalpel. "Order? You call terrorizing and trespassing order? And Karen's obedience doesn't make it right. It makes it criminal." For the first time, I saw a flicker of hesitation in Marcus's eyes. Just a fraction, but it was enough. Enough for Emily to act. She pulled something from her pocket, an ultra-small, high-decibel alarm device we had bought after the Karen incident, and configured to trigger remotely. Not lethal, but disorienting. Perfect for panic and confusion. She pressed it to a small button concealed in her sleeve. A shrill scream of sound ripped through the air, louder than a car horn, high-pitched, unbearable. Marcus and his crew stumbled instinctively, shielding their ears, some clutching their faces. "Move!" Emily hissed. We bolted left into the thickest part of the trees, moving low, fast, and silent as shadows. The high-decibel noise continued to scream behind us, forcing our pursuers into confusion. Marcus shouted, ordering his people, but the chaos was immediate. "Split up," he yelled, his voice cracking from the frequency of the alarm. Emily ducked behind a tree, pulling me down with her. She switched the alarm to a second device hidden on a higher branch. The blast repeated, sending Marcus's team scattering in the wrong direction. "Impressive," I muttered, still trying to catch my breath. She smirked. "We've had a few months to prepare. Karen was only the first wave. Marcus thinks he's a wolf, but tonight we're the hunters." I swallowed. "Do you know what you're planning?" "Yes," she said, eyes glowing. "We make them expose themselves completely. They want the cabin? Fine. We'll give them a reason to lose everything." We circled back toward a narrow clearing that sloped sharply down to the creek behind the cabin. The ground here was uneven, full of fallen branches and rocks, perfect for forcing people to slow down or trip if they were chasing us. Emily paused, pointing to a natural funnel in the undergrowth. "They'll chase us here," she said. "Once they do, it's easy to control the situation. Think about it, one route in, one route out. If we need leverage, this is it." My stomach churned. "And the sheriff?" Emily smiled faintly. "Sheriff Harlan will be in the loop soon enough. But right now, it's us. You ready?" I nodded. Ready or not, there was no turning back. We stepped into the narrow funnel and waited, crouched behind low pine trees. Shadows stretched across the ground as the moonlight broke through the canopy. Every snap of a branch, every rustle of leaves, made my pulse jump. Then came the first sound, a hurried footstep. "Over here," a voice shouted, one of Marcus's lieutenants, yelling in frustration as a disorienting alarm continued to echo. Emily pressed her lips together, holding me tight. "Wait for it." A figure emerged into the moonlight, Marcus himself, cautiously moving down the funnel, every step slow, deliberate. He didn't seem to realize we had the terrain advantage. Emily whispered, "Now." She flipped the alarm off. Silence descended abruptly, broken only by the rustling of leaves. Marcus froze, ears straining, eyes wide. Then Emily stepped out, hands raised slightly, calm but commanding. "Marcus Hale," she said, voice cutting through the night. "We know everything. Every plan, every map, every board signature. And we have evidence." His smirk faltered. "Evidence? Against me? You think you can." "I know I can," Emily interrupted. "And tonight, you'll admit you've crossed a line, or you'll face consequences that make your little threats look like child's play." Marcus's shoulders tensed. "You—" "I warned you," she said. "Karen warned you too, if you remember. But I'll make it simple. Leave the cabin, leave the land, or we take this straight to the county, and we have every single piece of proof needed to ruin your annexation plans." Marcus swallowed. He realized, finally, that we weren't scared, that we weren't naive, that we weren't the kind of people you could intimidate with fancy titles or HOA authority. "Do you have any idea what you're doing?" he snapped. "Yes," Emily said coldly, "and I suggest you choose wisely." A tense silence settled over the clearing. Marcus's lieutenants emerged, hesitant, sensing their leader's uncertainty. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Finally, Marcus's voice dropped. "You win, for now." Emily didn't flinch. "I'll accept temporary compliance, but know this, any attempt to interfere with this land, any attempt to intimidate us, and this will escalate far beyond anything you've ever imagined." He nodded stiffly, signaling his team to fall back. The tension didn't break entirely. They were still dangerous, still organized, still capable, but they retreated. Once the last footsteps faded, Emily turned to me, her eyes still hard with determination. "That's step one. But this isn't over. Marcus and his board think they're untouchable, but they've underestimated two things, knowledge and preparation." I swallowed, heart still racing. "And Karen?" "She'll be useful," Emily said with a wry smile. "We just need to know which side she's really on." We made our way back to the cabin, alert every step of the way. The night seemed alive, almost conspiratorial. Every rustle could be a spy. Every shadow could be a scout. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like we had some measure of control. Back at the cabin, Emily spread out the documents and maps we had captured earlier. Tomorrow, we start recording, tracking, and documenting everything. Every meeting, every discussion, every illegal move. And when Marcus and the board realized they were being watched, I asked. "They'll panic," she said, a thin smile curling her lips. "And panic makes people sloppy." That night, I didn't sleep, not fully, but I also didn't feel fair. Not anymore. We had struck first. We had disrupted their plans, and we had seen the cracks in their armor. Tomorrow, Pine Ridge wouldn't know what hit them, and neither would Karen, if she still had the courage to pick a side. Because in this game of revenge and power, we were no longer the hunted. We were the hunters. Dawn broke over the cabin like a warning bell. The sky was pale gray, and the forest air smelled sharp and alive, carrying a promise of change. Emily and I were already awake, moving in quiet, precise coordination. Last night's adrenaline hadn't worn off. If anything, it had sharpened our focus. "Today," Emily whispered, laying out the maps and files we had gathered, "we finished what we started." I peered at the spread of documents, each one a tiny weapon. Photos of Pine Ridge board meetings, scanned letters, recorded conversations, and even a digital copy of Karen's missteps. Every detail documented meticulously. "You really think this will work?" She smiled faintly, her eyes glinting with confidence. "Not think. I know. Our first target, Karen, though she had stormed off in panic, she wasn't gone. Not entirely. By the time we had finished breakfast, a soft knock echoed at our door. Karen. She didn't pound. She didn't threaten. She stood on the porch, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, shoulders slumped and hair frizzed from a previous humiliation. "You," she began, voice tight, "you really turned the tables on them last night." Emily opened the door wider. "We did what needed to be done. And you—" Karen hesitated, glancing at the surrounding forest. I don't know. I followed orders for so long, thought I was doing good. But seeing Marcus tonight," she swallowed, "he doesn't care about rules. He only cares about power. I never realized I was just a pawn." Emily stepped forward. "And now?" Karen's voice cracked. "Now, I want out. I don't want to be part of their schemes anymore. I want to help you, if you'll let me." I exchanged a glance with Emily. "Can we trust her?" Emily's answer was simple. "We'll keep her close, but under watch. She can't hurt us anymore, and she might prove useful." Karen nodded, relief washing over her face like sunlight through clouds. "Thank you. You have no idea how freeing it feels." With Karen's reluctant allegiance secured, we turned our attention to Pine Ridge Board, the real source of danger. Marcus Hale and his lieutenants thought last night had been a warning. They had no idea we had compiled a dossier that could destroy every one of their ambitions. We drove into town late morning, Karen riding shotgun. The clubhouse sat exactly as it had the night before, pristine, confident, untouchable. But today, we weren't just visitors. We were prosecutors, witnesses, and predators rolled into one. Emily walked straight to the front office, where she confronted the receptionist with documents in hand. "We need to speak with the board. All of them. And we're recording this conversation." A pause. Hesitation. Then, surprisingly, permission. Marcus had already been briefed. Karen's betrayal had reached him in whispers, and his arrogance underestimated the precision of our plan. Inside, the board members were waiting. Marcus Hale at the head, expression perfect. But there was tension now, barely contained beneath his mask of control. Emily didn't waste a second. "You all know why we're here. You're attempting to illegally annex land, harass property owners, and bypass county ordinances. And we have every piece of evidence, emails, recordings, eyewitness accounts, even your own statements. It's all documented." The room fell silent. Faces turned pale as the weight of truth landed. Karen, standing to the side, whispered quietly enough for only Emily and me to hear, "I've never seen them like this before." Marcus's smile wavered. "You don't understand. This isn't personal. We're improving the community. Emily's eyes bore into him. It is personal. It's theft, intimidation, abuse of power. And we've got the proof. Every single step of your plan. Another board member, one so smug and untouchable, stuttered. But we were just for the community. Your intentions don't matter, Emily said. Your actions are illegal and they are documented. I leaned forward, adding my own voice. And you thought you could intimidate us, threaten us, force us out. But you forgot one thing. We're not afraid of you, and we're not alone. Emily hit the final button on her tablet. Recorded evidence played out loud. Conversations, plans, admissions. Every lie Marcus told, every misused regulation, every attempt to coerce or harass, unraveled in real time. Marcus's face drained of color. The room shifted uncomfortably as his lieutenants realized the enormity of what was happening. You can't do this, Marcus said, voice rising. Oh, we can, Emily said simply. And we already have. This is going straight to the county, to legal authorities. And yes, Sheriff Harlan is already aware. Your expansion plans are frozen, your annexation petition voided, and your misuse of HOA authority documented. Karen stepped forward, timidly but with growing confidence. And I'll testify about everything. About Marcus. About the board. About myself. I won't lie. I won't defend you anymore. The room erupted in whispered panic. Board members argued among themselves, trying to salvage credibility. But the damage was done. We had exposed their plans, their lies, and their schemes. Emily turned to me, voice low but fierce. This is it. They either comply, or they fall. And Marcus is finished. Marcus glared, but there was nothing left to do. Karen's testimony alone could dismantle his control. Add our evidence, and the board was powerless. Hours later, after meetings with the county attorney and Sheriff Harlan, the resolution became official. Marcus Hale and his board members were formally reprimanded, their expansion plan permanently blocked, and legal action threatened for future attempts at harassment. Karen, now fully aligned with Emily and me, had begun the long process of repairing the damage she'd done over the years. Back at the cabin, we watched the sun set over the ridge, the forest bathed in gold and orange. The tension that had gripped me for weeks finally released, replaced with a quiet satisfaction. Emily leaned back against the railing. You know, she said, revenge isn't about cruelty. It's about justice. And tonight, justice was served. I nodded, looking at the trees that had shielded us, the cabin that had become a fortress, and the woman who had stood beside me, my partner, strategist, and co-conspirator. We made them pay, but we did it smart, and no one got hurt. Emily smiled, brushing her hair back from her face. Exactly. And the lesson for Pine Ridge is clear. You don't mess with people who know how to fight back. The air smelled sweet to somehow, charged with the calm certainty of victory. Karen appeared beside us, quiet, humbled, finally free from the chains of her own ambition. She didn't speak, but her nod said everything. We had taken the predator and turned her into an ally, reshaping the battlefield in our favor. I laughed softly, a sound I hadn't realized I'd been holding back. I never thought a cabin in the woods would end with me taking down a whole HOA and their puppet master. Emily chuckled. Well, you didn't. I did. But you were useful. I elbowed her gently, glad to be part of the team. We stood there in silence for a while, watching the last streaks of sunlight vanish behind the ridges. The threat was gone, the danger neutralized, and for the first time in weeks, we could breathe without looking over our shoulders. And in that quiet, I understood something important. Revenge isn't just about payback. It's about balance. About making sure people who abuse power face consequences, and about protecting the life and home you've built against those who would take it away. Pine Ridge would never forget us. Marcus Hale would never forget Emily. And Karen. Karen would finally learn what it meant to be human, fallible and accountable. We had won. The cabin, our land, and our peace were ours. And as the first stars blink awake above the ridge, I realized that sometimes justice and revenge come not from force, but from preparation, intelligence, and knowing exactly how to turn someone's own power against them. The forest was silent now, save for the whisper of the wind through the pines. But inside me, the thrill of victory and the satisfaction of setting things right roared louder than any storm Karen or Marcus could ever conjure. We stepped back inside the cabin, doors locked, blinds secured, and for the first time, fully safe. Revenge had its price, but for us, it had been worth every calculated move. We had survived. We had fought. We had won. And Pine Ridge would never dare to cross our path again. The end.